too. We hope that you had a great week.
This week, we're going to talk about something that usually gets overlooked.
It's water quality.
You're right. Water quality, especially when we think about spraying and spray solution, oftentimes gets overlooked. We're in a hurry, just like we've been in this last week, and we're trying to get the tank filled with water. We're trying to make sure the winds are right, the temperature right, the humidity's right, and we just kind of throw in whatever we have. But when we think about that sprayer tank, over 95% of that sprayer tank is filled with water. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what do we need to be looking for in water. And in fact, there's so much to talk about today that we're even going to finish it up next week by talking about it. But this really all stems from a grower meeting that I got to host with one of my good friends, Billy Carter, down in Kentucky. And we sat down in a grower meeting and we ended up spending a couple of hours looking at water tests and talking about what do we really need to be seeing in order to maximize our herbicide dollars.
So what do we need to look at in our water?
So there's a lot of tests that we can do in our water. We can send it off to a state lab and they're going to give us all sorts of information back. But I really like to start with two key features: water hardness and pH.
How is water hard? It's liquid.
You're right. When we say hardness of water or the idea behind that, it seems really funny because we could drink the water that we have right there in our cup. But when we think about hardness and we think about water, it's about cations that are going to be found in that water. And remember, cations are positively charged, just like when we talked about our soils. Specifically, when we're looking at water, a lot of times it's calcium, it's magnesium, and it's iron. And the issues with a lot of these positively charged cations is that they will bind with a lot of our really common herbicides, which are going to be weak acids, like our glyphosate, our glufosinates, really common tank mixes. And when those hard water ions bond with those herbicides, it makes it so the herbicides don't work. So now all of a sudden, we're battling weeds in our field anyway, and now our herbicides are not functioning to their full effect, and we're not able to control those weeds.
So how do we test our hardness in our water?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can go ahead and go out to the well, and you'd want to do it outside your house, wherever you're going to fill up your sprayer. You can collect a sample and send it off to a water quality lab.
Or you could purchase these test strips online and do it at your house.
They're fairly easy to use.
You dip it in the water for 2 seconds and swirl it around.
And then you compare the color on the strip to the colors on the back of the bottle.
So after we take a look at what our water levels are and we compare those on the back of our chart, we find that we're running at about 120 parts per million total hardness. Girls, that means when we look at the USGS water quality survey, we'd be considered to have moderately hard to hard water.
Dad, now that we know we have hard water, what do we do next?
Yeah, you're right. Since we know we have moderately hard to hard water, we have to start thinking about how do we treat those positively charged cations so our herbicides function as they're supposed to. The way that we do that is what is called AMS. And AMS really can come in a couple of different forms. Really common to have bagged AMS. They'll call it dry AMS. And we can simply dump that in as we're filling up our water tank, and we can mix that. And what's going to happen is that ammonium is going to come apart from our sulfates. And the sulfates are going to bind on to our hard cations, like the calciums, the magnesiums. And by binding onto that, it's no longer going to be able to bind on to our weak acid herbicides, like our Roundup. So that's the first thing that we need to do. And we need to make sure we're treating that water before we put the herbicide in. Now, the second part of this, though, is also going to be the nitrogen side, right? The ammonium side of our AMS. And that's because when we bind up the cations with the sulfate part, the ammoniums then can interact with our herbicides and increase how efficient they're actually going to function. Specifically, we see this a lot of times with our Liberty herbicides. We say that we really like to have a hot mix, or they really are nitrogen loving. And that's why the glufosinate or the glyphosate is going to bind with that ammonium, and it's going to allow the plant to take that in quicker, which is then going to allow our herbicide to function better.
So, Dad, you brought up the dry forms of AMS. Are there any other forms?
Yeah, so our dry forms of AMS are our traditional ways that we're going to treat our water quality issues. But there's also liquid forms of AMS. And the nice thing with liquid forms of AMS is we don't have all these bags, we don't have all these pallets, it's not dusty. You can simply just go ahead and apply the AMS in that liquid form. So like at Ag Explorer, we have Insider 2.0, which is just strictly a liquid AMS. 3.4 pounds of AMS per gallon. We also have other products though that work really nice with AMS, like Combust. And Combust is not going to be only AMS, but it's also going to have an acidifier with it. It has some adjuvants in there and it has a defoamer. So it's just everything all in one. And what we're trying to do is really simplify the process of getting AMS into our water, being able to treat the water quality issue, but then also be able to enhance the efficacy of our herbicides with those ammoniums, just like we talked about.
That's cool, Dad. You can fix any problem.
I think that's all that we have to talk about today. Have a great day.
See you next week.